So, a very good morning to all of you again. I hope you had a good day yesterday and it's going to be a good day again tomorrow and today as well. So, in continuation with our yesterday's lecture, in which we have gone through the philosophy in general as well as philosophy related to research and the ethical context of it, right? Like ethics, what ethics we should take care of. So, in continuation of ethics, today we will be talking about the scientific conduct, like what conduct is being expected when we are talking in research, like how should we behave or for what things we should be very careful in doing while we are writing a paper, we are doing a PhD, while whatever we are doing in our research, we will be discussing how we are expected to behave so that we follow the guidelines of ethical conduct. So the very first thing, let me ask you, like to start with, like let me ask you a very first question, as my subheading says, authorship. So we'll be talking about more authorship today. साहब जो नाम दे देते हैं पेपर्स में लाइक क्वेश्चन वाज यस्टरडे कि ऑथरशिप किसको देनी चाहिए राइट से ऑथरशिप किसको मिलनी चाहिए किसको देनी चाहिए किसको एक्सेप्ट करनी चाहिए लेट्स discuss this little more closely. So what do you all think who deserves an authorship, right? The person basically who did the experimental most of the work, or the person who brought the grant or who is paying money or having a lab space for you, like the PI maybe. And maybe sometimes we have a special person writing for a manuscript, right? So a person who has written that manuscript for you, like the polished final manuscript, or maybe someone like on very high position, you think maybe that will increase the chances of acceptance in a higher journal. So there are different, roles, different contributions of people, and different stake when people come in your paper, what they are doing in your paper, and what they are contributing in your paper. So you have to understand कि साहब ये authorship जो है किसको मिलनी चाहिए और authorship is not a reward, like this is not like a reward you are giving to somebody. What you're doing by that, you are making someone responsible for what you have written, right? So even people who are having the authorship, अगर हम कोई दोस्त हमारा कह रहा है भाई इसमें authorship हम तुम्हें दे देते हैं, तो okay, you shouldn't be like, okay, this is something very nice, very positive. Basically, by being an author on a paper, you are taking a responsibility of that work, right? Whether it is good or whether it is shady, right? It doesn't matter. You are responsible for this. So today we will learn why authorship is not just a medal, it is more of an ethical commitment or a responsibility of that paper. So let's move forward. So now this is just like a snapshot of a paper to discuss. So there are different positions of authorship, right? It could be like a first authorship, or like a very first author you are, or maybe you are a corresponding author, or maybe you are some contributor, some authors in between. So what and how basically you decide who is going to be on what position. So there are some cases when people also talk about like, hey, somebody has funded our research. Especially these days, it is very common, like you get funding sometimes not for the work, very often for like paying the article processing fee. Have you heard article processing fees for a paper? When you publish a paper these days, journal often ask at the very end, साहब इसके इतने पैसे आप जमा कर दीजिए. This is like for processing or publishing your paper. So people often take help for that purposes. Like many of our friends in maybe Gulf countries or other countries who are like well funded, they help our colleagues in India. So should we give authorship to them as well? So first of all, who is going to be the first author? So that's what we have to understand. So first author किसको किसे होना चाहिए? The first author should be the person who designed the experiment, right? Who designed the experiment, who performed the experiment, who maybe has written a very first draft of a manuscript, like a rough draft, जो भी उसने किया, उसने कुछ बना के PI को पेश किया, या even a person who is also coordinating the study. Sometimes our work is not only associated with single department. If it's like a clinical study, maybe you are working with OPDs, you're working with research departments. So even if a person is coordinating for getting data, for getting inputs, so he is also included in a very first authorship. तो फर्स्ट ऑथरशिप में कौन आ रहा है? साहब उसने काम भी किया हो, उसने लिखा भी हो, उसे उस डेटा का एनालिसिस भी पता हो और उसने डिजाइन में भी कंट्रीब्यूट किया हो. तो बेसिकली मैक्सिमल पार्ट जो है फर्स्ट ऑथर से एक्सपेक्ट किया जाता है. व्हाट इज कॉरेस्पॉन्डिंग ऑथर देन? अगर आप कह रहे हैं साहब सब कुछ तो आपने फर्स्ट ऑथर को दे दिया, तो कॉरेस्पॉन्डिंग ऑथर जो पीआई है, जो सुपरवाइजर है, वो उसका क्या कंट्रीब्यूशन है? तो सबसे पहले तो पीआई जो है इज अ सीनियर फैकल्टी. He is your guide, he is your supervisor, so you have an idea. Basically you don't normally have an independent idea, you have an idea from him, then you discuss, you read, you develop, you both have some consensus, and then you make some ideas. So supervisor is going to be the corresponding author. What responsibilities he owes? He basically see how the progress of your work is going on, like your PhD or your project. He also is responsible for the corresponding of the manuscript, like he's also writing the emails to the journal, submitting the paper. He's also responsible for approving your study data. आप जो भी कुछ डेटा कलेक्ट कर रहे हैं, जो भी कुछ एक्सपेरिमेंट से डेटा ला रहे हैं, basically he's approving, giving approval for that data. So a person who is senior and who is supervising you in your research project or your PhD, and who is responsible for communicating or publishing your paper is a corresponding author. So अब ये बीच में जो contributing authors हैं, they have different level of contribution. ठीक है? They are also contributing, maybe might be in analyzing a data, collecting your data, or maybe giving some materials, providing some materials, right? Like you are using some raw material, and there is a person who is processing that raw material, giving you an extract out of it, or giving you making something out of it and giving you so that you can do your experiment or you can do your study. A person in between who is aiding your research is going to become in between contributors. It could be editing. Even some people also give names to person who edit your manuscript, like improving in English, improving in language. So people also do that. Also, if there is some senior faculty in your department besides your supervisor, like some very emeritus professor, same field, you discuss your study, or you even he suggested something and you think that his points improved your study, he can also be an author, maybe a contributor, not as a primary one like a first author, neither he would be like a corresponding one. So he's just be a contributor. So if there is anything else somebody is doing in your work, in your study, थोड़ी सी help, थोड़ा सा assistance, थोड़ी सी aid, so he should be going into the main authors. We are going to acknowledge them. Right? There is a section of acknowledgement. So for minor helps, not major contributions, we always have like an acknowledgement section, and that acknowledgement section basically take care of those helps or those people who are supporting our study but not really contributing to the data. So let's go to the next slide. So there are 4 criteria which an author must meet basically to claim his or her position. So what are those criteria? A substantial contribution. कि साहब आपने कुछ contribution किया है data wise or conceptual wise, or maybe planning a study, drafting and revising the article. You have written or you have revised or some input, right? Approval of the final version. जब भी जिसने भी लिखा, जिसने भी एक्सपेरिमेंट किया, जैसे भी तैयार हुआ, बट जब फाइनल मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट तैयार हो जाती है, एंड बिफोर सबमिटिंग टू अ जर्नल, we have to take an approval from each and every author. Normally this practice is not very common in this part of the world, but when we are submitting, there is a very you can say like a column while submitting that every author agrees for this submission, so they require that permission. So it's good that we kind of send a final draft to all the authors. It's kind of like they are approving it. If somebody has some objection, they will write down to you. So normally approval for our final version and agreement to the accountability for all the aspects of the manuscript. जो भी उसके अंदर है, whatever data, whatever hypothesis, whatever story you are building, they are also going to be accountable for the accuracy, for the integrity of that data. So what these rules, why these rules matter? Because basically these rules are protecting the fairness of a work or a project. They are ensuring accountability कि सब जिम्मेदार रहे आप, ठीक है, आपने कुछ करा है, आपने कोई contribution किया है, तो this is ensuring accountability. If you are in a study, preserves scientific integrity. लाइक कि जो लोग कंट्रीब्यूट कर रहे हैं वो भी लोग रहें, ऐसा नहीं है कि और लोग आ जाएं या जो जिसने किया है वो हट जाए और मे बी थर्ड पर्सन आ जाए. तो it's like preserving scientific integrity, promotes ethical behavior. The more we talk about these things, it will promote the ethical behavior among us, right? So now authorship is not like a signature. ऐसा नहीं है कि आप okay, authorship is like this is like a signature of my study. That is basically you should feel a responsibility of your data. This is assigning that you are accountable for that study. This is definitely going to be a feather of good thing in your cap, but that is you are owning a responsibility of whatever you are contributing. So you have to believe in your data, you have to accountable for your data, and you have to definitely be contributing in that data, right? So I should say did author should did some contribution, some scientific work, should be helping in writing and revising, and definitely will be approving the final version, and he or she has to be responsible for the whole paper or for the whole study. So moving forward, there are these are yes.
So, is there any rule or restriction when any copyright or any patent kind of that conduct happens? Then all the authors and co-authors will be notified for that.
Yeah, but when you have at least when you have like paper or any patent, and if there is some misconduct is found, then in any question mark is found, so in paper they are going to first catch the corresponding author. So because that is the person who is communicating, that is assumed to be the senior person, and that is overall taking the responsibility. In patent also you have different kind of roles like a assignee, and there also the responsible is the primary senior author. So you always have like a senior author, the corresponding author, to be responsible, to be answerable able initially when a query is coming, but eventually everybody will be asked, right? Because if some experiment is done by some person who is in the contributing author, so he or she will be questioned about the answer. तो शुरुआत में कोई भी इंक्वायरी आएगी कॉरेस्पॉन्डिंग ऑथर के पास, बट इसका मतलब ये नहीं है सारी गलती उसकी है. जिसने जो काम किया है उससे वो पूछा जाता है, बाकायदा इंक्वायरी बैठती है, इन्वेस्टिगेशन होता है, जब इस तरह की चीजें होती है, एंड देन द पर्सन who did that work or who did that thing, that data, that image or that writing part, उससे पूछा जाता है. तो to start with, corresponding author will be asked by the editor और जो भी चीज है, ठीक है. तो some certain guidelines हैं कि कैसे हमें how we should roll out, किस तरह से हमें work करना चाहिए. So the first thing is that one person should not decide the authorship. And normally ऐसा ठीक है, the senior person, the corresponding author has the right because he is controlling, but still he shouldn't be deciding कि okay ठीक है तुम पहले पे तुम दूसरे पे. He should call everybody, he should be asking कि आपने क्या किया है, आपने क्या किया है, आपने क्या किया है. Then according to the rule, authorship is normally decided कि सब आपका ही contribution है, आपका ही contribution है. और ये normally पता होता है कि first author कौन होता है, because वो उसका main project होता है, तो that is normally clear. जो problem आती है वो बीच में आती है कि contributors बीच में second पे कौन जाएगा, third पे कौन जाएगा, तो वहां पर so one person shouldn't be solely responsible. And अगर minor contributions में है तो we always have an acknowledgement section, and equal contributions to the study are also published. अगर ऐसा कुछ हुआ है कि when two people are claiming that we have contributed equally, or like दोनों लोगों का major project है, दोनों लोगों ने एक सा काम किया है, तो we also have that option कि आप first और second पे रखते हैं authors को, and then you mark them कहीं asterisk लगा के और नीचे लिख देते हैं कि साहब they are equal authors for this paper. तो जो भी फर्स्ट ऑथरशिप है वो सेकंड पे नाम है उसका, बट उसका फर्स्ट ऑथरशिप में ही उसको मार्क्स मिलते हैं अगर सिलेक्शन कमिटीज में और जहां भी उसका रोल होता है, राइट? सो म्यूचुअल अमंग को ऑथर्स, तो ये सारी चीजें म्यूचुअल होनी चाहिए। एंड ऑर्डर रिफ्लेक्ट्स कंट्रीब्यूशन, बेसिकली जो ऑर्डर ऑफ ऑथरशिप है वो कंट्रीब्यूशन रिफ्लेक्ट करना चाहिए, रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी और लीडरशिप रिफ्लेक्ट करनी चाहिए। नेक्स्ट थिंग इज व्हाट इज नॉट एक्सेप्टेबल, इसकी हमने कल भी बात की थी, टुडे आल्सो वी आर गोना टच दीस थिंग्स। सो व्हाट इज घोस्ट राइटर, डिस्कस किया था कि when we hire some third party, some company, some services, they write the paper for us. That is not very common in academia, right? That is more common in pharmaceutical industries, or maybe in clinical trials when doctors are busy with their studies, so somebody has to write, and they're not very used to of writing these manuscripts, so they sometimes hire. So in those cases, people do ghost writership, and that is not like a very good thing, not very acceptable as being an authorship. So the person who contributed the most is basically not going to be the author, because that person is being paid as for his services if he's having a company. So next is the guest authorship. So guest authorship क्या है? Guest or gift authorship are kind of similar, but guest authorship हम अक्सर देते हैं for prestige, for maybe a senior person in our department, maybe in our university, या very someone or very higher position. हम क्या कहते हैं कि ठीक है साहब इनका नाम भी डाल देते हैं, उन्होंने इतने पेपर पब्लिश किए हैं, तो let's make him an a guest author. So this also basically reflects a little bit of dishonesty to other contributors. ठीक है, वो तो ठीक है, मे बी ही इज फाइन विद दैट, और आपको ये लग रहा है कि आपके पेपर का वेटेज बढ़ रहा है. What's that? They are not paid. They are just like some professors, some extremely good profile professors, but they are not really contributed into the study. So हम सोचते हैं कि भाई ये एक्सपर्ट है, इसका नाम डालने से शायद हमारा पेपर अच्छी जगह छप जाएगा या more recognition मिलेगा, तो we include those authors. तो वो जो authors already हैं जिन्होंने contribute किया है, उनके लिए थोड़ा सा injustice हो जाता है. So we have to take care of that, how we have to include them, or maybe we should involve them in reviewing, or maybe having come in something some way. Gift author is similar, but gift author अक्सर आपने देखा होगा कि ठीक है दो दोस्त हैं, they both are professors, they both are publishing, तो उन्होंने कहा साहब ऐसा करते हैं कि मेरे पेपर में भी आप मेरा नाम डालिए, अपना नाम डालिए, मैं आपके पेपर में, तो क्या होगा एक एक पेपर दोनों पब्लिश करेंगे, इवेंचुअली वी बोथ हैव टू पेपर्स इन द एंड. So we are gifting papers, right? So because of the same stature or being a friend, so this is called a gift authorship. So that's also is discouraged. The favors basically are not very acceptable. So some other potential disputes, कुछ other चीजें हैं जो basically आनी चाहिए लाइफ में. So being involved in a study but not listed as an author. So अक्सर ऐसा होता है कि किसी तरह से कुछ लोग हमारी स्टडी में इन्वॉल्व होते हैं. Maybe it could be like a person doing a statistic analysis for our study, right? So collecting a data. Sometimes we often if people are coming from agriculture background, so sometimes what they do, they hire someone for collecting some data कि साहब आप फील्ड में जाइए, हमें ये measurements या maybe ये material you collect, they pay for it. So they are doing the collection of data, but they are not basically getting the authorship. To try to avoid these practices, the hiring third party people, because you're not giving those data. And if there are some people, like if they are students, like maybe some bachelor student, आपने कहा junior है, he will also learn, fine, at that point maybe he's learning. But if he decides to claim his or her authorship, so then it's going to be a serious concern, क्योंकि फिर उसकी सुनवाई होगी, because he or she has contributed. So you don't be silence. So basically being silence, not talking about ठीक है हम आपसे डेटा पहले बता दो कि आप ये काम कर रहे हो पर हम इसकी ऑथरशिप नहीं देंगे. Did you agree for that? Consent, have a consent. So if 2 years back, 5 years back, if somebody say, oh no, I contributed, I want an authorship, so you have a consent. So it's always to talk about everything before starting. So it's good to talk about. Silence is always a dispute. So someone taking your idea and publishing. Okay, often people what you have heard in many universities and many departments, कि साहब क्या करते हैं लोग, they try to hide their research. They will not tell you. Even students, the PI say, hey, don't tell what you are working on to your, departmental floor pupil, other PI students. They try to hide. Why this practice comes into play? People say that when we share, when we talk about our studies, so other people grab the idea. They write, they do some study, or even not a study. They just write a review on that. So there you are doing experiment, and somebody basically just pick that topic, write a review article because it is faster than an experiment, and publish. So then you have complaints that our idea is being stolen. So that is many colleagues often do that. It has been not nothing that has never happened. So people even publish papers. So that is always good that if you are doing something on a same topic, you include the primary person, जहाँ जो आदमी काम कर रहा है, जहाँ आपने सुना था, right? So otherwise it's again it's an intellectual theft, we say in technical terms. So try to avoid it. Finding your name on a publication. Some people take you for granted, like okay, maybe you are a friend, or yes, you are, even when we are student of a supervisor, ठीक है, हमने PhD करी, he was our he was an author in our paper, then we pass out, we go somewhere else. But then what we do, we keep on adding his or her name. So without consent and adding somebody's name is also not ethical. So you always email. Email is the best proof in these days. No like postal thing, just email them, so you have a proof. इस तारीख में, इस डेट में, इस टाइम में आपने ईमेल किया था, उनको ईमेल मिल गया, एंड देन यू कि सर हम ये जमा कर रहे हैं, डिड यू हैव एनी कमेंट, जस्ट सो basically that built a culture of information, and like you have the consent of whatever you are doing. तो कोई भी आपको ये नहीं कहेगा साहब आपने ये गलत किया, because you have a consent. So involve them and inform them. So information is very necessary. So this is also dangerous, putting somebody's name without knowing them. So that is sometimes called fraudulent actions basically. So now if a complaint is filed over a dispute, an investigation may, so yeah, if somebody files a complaint, then definitely there will be an investigation. So journal, in that regard, sometimes journal has to retract the paper or take away the authorship, or they contact the university, क्योंकि जो complaints होती हैं वो यूनिवर्सिटी अथॉरिटीज को नहीं करते हैं लोग, वो क्या करते हैं कि जहां जर्नल में पेपर छपा है उस पे एडिटर को करते हैं, देन एडिटर comes into play, then they contact your university officers and these. So just don't I mean, save yourself from getting into these traps. So first thing is talk about it कि साहब अगर आप ये काम कर रहे हैं तो आपका ये contribution इस data तक है, maybe I'm sorry, maybe I will not be making an author, so did you agree for that? So just talk, just make it very clear. और जिनको आप author बना रहे हैं, just emails are the best idea. Take in quotes, just involve them. So now corresponding authorship के बारे में कुछ बात कर लेते हैं. Corresponding authorship could be sounds lucrative, ठीक है हम senior हैं, but it has the most stake on it, right? So ज़्यादा maximum responsibility या maximum questions उनसे पूछे जाएंगे, जो accuracy of data के बारे में हो, या authorship का order के बारे में हो कि आपने इसको सेकंड रखा, इसको थर्ड रखा, इसको फोर्थ रखा, या अप्रूवल ऑफ फाइनल ड्राफ्ट के बारे में हो कि साहब ये पेपर गया छपा अंदर, तो आप ये नहीं कह सकते कि ठीक है, ओ दैट इज अ मिस्टेक मे बी ऑफ माय स्टूडेंट, बिकॉज़ फाइनल अप्रूवल हैज टू बी from the senior author, because I know that there are many senior people in this class too, so they'll be acting both ways, having be a corresponding author as well as their own primary correspondence. So handling all correspondence and responding to inquiries. So जो भी उससे related कोई emails आएंगे, कोई आपकी inquiries आएंगी, it could be data, it could be normal correspondence, वो corresponding author को जवाब देना होगा. There are some committees, basically journal publication houses have, we call them committee of publication ethics. So what we say, if there is if somebody register a complaint for, or even after submitting a publication, it's maybe at the very end of the publication, like they are about to accept our paper, पता नहीं आप लोगों ने सुना होगा, क्या होता है, आप कई बार ऐसा हो जाता है, द कॉरेस्पॉन्डिंग ऑथर वांट्स टू ऐड समथिंग, मे बी आई हैव टू टेक दिस।
जी सर। जी सर, मैं क्लास ले रहा था अभी।
जी। जी जी, मैं ऊपर, ठीक है सर। So what is this? Like जब हम ऐसा होता है कि हम कोई पेपर सबमिट कर चुके होते हैं, वो रिव्यू भी हो चुका होता है, at the very end sometimes we want to add an author or we want to remove an author from the manuscript. तो जर्नल के पास एक पूरी गाइडलाइंस है, एक पूरा मैकेनिज्म है, they will ask you कि क्यों लास्ट मोमेंट पे आप किसी को ऐड करना चाह रहे हैं अपनी स्टडी में, या क्यों रिमूव करना चाह रहे हैं जब आपने शुरू में जब जमा किया, तो they have that whole questions like why you are doing it. कुछ ऐड है तो दे विल आस्क लाइक व्हाट इज द रीसेंट कंट्रीब्यूशन, कि अब क्या कंट्रीब्यूट नया कर दिया, तो यू आर एडिंग एन ऑथर एंड डू ऑल ऑथर्स agree to it, so they will need a permission from all the authors on the paper for adding or removing any author's commits. So same is for removal of an author, so there is the whole pipeline and guidelines for it, right? So that's all. So now let's talk about so that was the authorship के बारे में हमने काफी डिस्कस किया, किसको ऑथर होना चाहिए, किस पोजीशन पे होना चाहिए, और ऑथरशिप कोई रिवॉर्ड नहीं है. Basically authorship is making you responsible for the data accuracy, integrity and everything. Now the very very burning problem, it was earlier, not lately, but plagiarism or plagiarism, however you pronounce, right? So what exactly that is? Kya hai plagiarism? Anybody from the audience?
Copying others' work without giving quotation marks or citation.
Yes, so that's true. So, but it's not just copying somebody's work. It is stealing intellectual property, right? So, yeah. So that's also, so basically you are stealing somebody's intellectual property, and that is a big no in the scientific community. So as the very first thing says, we must ensure that others' credit is protected in our research output. कि साहब जो भी हमने कहीं से सीखा है, कहीं से लिया है, कहीं से समझा है, या हम उसे लिख भी रहे हैं, तो उसको क्रेडिट मिलना चाहिए. क्रेडिट किस तरह से मिलता है, जैसे अभी पीछे से मैम ने आवाज कहा कि साहब by citing them, right? Just acknowledge them by how citing, not acknowledgements, like citing them as a reference कि भाई इसने ये बात कही थी, या हमें ये चीज यहाँ से मिली थी. So basically every piece of knowledge we take, it could be either an idea from a paper, or maybe an image from it, or maybe anything like a sentence or a paragraph or anything, that's their stuff, that's their copyright. So we have to acknowledge them, right? So ethics demand acknowledgement, and acknowledgement here means citing them as a reference, one of the references in your manuscript. So it is like taking somebody's credit that does not belong to us. So अगर हम उसे cite नहीं करते और वो चीज अपने ही तरह से लिख देते हैं, तो इसका मतलब ऐसा लग रहा है कि साहब हम ये चीज कह रहे हैं, तो वो नहीं होना चाहिए. So basically this is the outline of a paper, कि किस तरह से पेपर पूरा बनता है, या हम लिखते हैं abstract, keywords, introduction. So why it is here? Basically this is showing the moment we begin writing a paper. Okay, maybe it's abstract, it's anything, but most importantly these three things: introduction है, experimental procedure है, discussion है, results है. So the moment we start writing the paper, every section basically depends upon prior knowledge. ठीक है, हम पढ़ रहे हैं, हम पढ़ के कुछ लिख रहे हैं, तो ऐसा नहीं है कि हम स्टैंड अलोन हवा में कुछ लिख रहे हैं. We are reading, we are learning from others, and then we are writing. So basically nothing is standalone. We are learning from existing knowledge. So because of that, we have to cite those contributors, those knowledge makers in our paper. So that is why citing is not a formality, that is our fundamental duty or a fundamental responsibility. So we should cite them. In science, originality आप ये ना सोचें कि अरे हम साइट कर रहे हैं तो ऐसा लगेगा कि सब कुछ तो इन्होंने दूसरों से पढ़ लिया है तो खुद तो you shouldn't be thinking about that because originality doesn't work is not like working alone. ऐसा कोई expect नहीं कर रहा है that okay you are the only person who is thinking about this idea, nobody else has thought about it before. Basically it is acknowledging from where you learn, right? You are having your own idea, you are developing your original idea, but you're also learning from others' work. So you have to cite them. So it's very important that you acknowledge everyone who helped you along the way. कहाँ किसी भी तरह like साइंस की अलावा भी कोई भी कहीं भी help अगर आपको कर रहा है तो you should have that in your nature or in your habit that you should acknowledge them, right? So वो क्यों हम acknowledge करना चाहते हैं जिससे कि वो लोग ये प्रैक्टिस चलती रहे. They shouldn't be like oh मैंने मदद भी करी and it was of no use, कोई उसे लगा ही नहीं कि that was of any use. So when you thank somebody, you acknowledge somebody, the culture is being basically created of being the person is meaningful. So वो help जो है आगे करता रहेगा. That person that will not stop helping others. So now next slide is again plagiarism. So one author's deliberately use another author's work without permission, credit or acknowledgement. So basically that's another definition. उसमें चाहे data हो, उसमें words हो, उसमें phrases हो, ideas हो या concepts हो, that's all we have already discussed this, right? So different level of severity. अब इसमें plagiarism किस level का है वो depend करता है कि आपने कितना कॉपी किया है या कितना उसमें दूसरे के मटेरियल से इम्बाइब किया है. So it could be word by word, line to line, right? So it could be like a major thing or it could be like just you are having some words changing the sentences or paraphrasing. So it depends कि आप क्या उसमें copy कर रहे हैं. It could be some results part, some data, some image, it could be anything. So depending upon how much you have copied and in what way it is in your study, that there are different levels of severity. So now this is something for easy understanding कि क्या चीज है ये literal copying क्या है. Literal copying है when we copy somebody's text like word to word. हम क्या करते हैं कि वो पूरी लाइन उतार दी हमने वहां पर और फिर अपनी लाइन भी लिख दी बीच में, फिर वो पूरी की पूरी ऐसी उतार दी. तो वर्ड बाय वर्ड जो कॉपिंग है उसे लिटरल कॉपिंग कहते हैं एंड दैट इज डेफिनेटली अनएथिकल. तो उसमें क्या होना चाहिए कि कई बार ऐसा होता है कुछ लोग इसका ये रीजन देते हैं कि अरे जब हम when we were reading the paper so we copied that but then somehow we lost the track of that paper कि कहाँ से लिया था तो we were like missed the citation. So we should always keep a database of the paper what we are reading. जो भी हम जहाँ से भी कुछ पढ़ रहे हैं कुछ आइडिया ले रहे हैं so it is very important that you have keep the track of the resource or the source or the paper. Like make sure you fully acknowledge that person's proper citation is required. Use quotation mark for word copy. अगर ऐसा है जहां आप word by word literally copy करते हैं paste करते हैं quotation mark करिए and then give a citation. When you put a quotation mark it reflects that these are not your words, they are from. Though this is the last extreme thing, people shouldn't be doing it, but अगर कोई ऐसी चीज है जिसे आप ऐसा ही लिखना चाहते हैं तो उसे आप quotation mark लगाइए और उसे properly reference देके दीजिए. Then what is substantial copying? Substantial copying is something from research material process. कि आपने कैसे research material लिया, कैसे data collect किया, कहीं से आपने जो भी उसका method था वो पूरा आपने कॉपी कर लिया. ऐसे कैसे वो उसमें कॉपी कर दिया, टेबल्स कौन सी ली थी, जो भी उसने अपने एक्सपेरिमेंटल सेटअप के लिए जिस मेजरमेंट्स की टेबल यूज करी थी, जिस मेजरमेंट का जो भी यूज किया था, आपने वो मटेरियल जो रिक्वायर्ड था, जो आपका रिसोर्सेज जो थी वो आपने कॉपी कर ली. तो ये भी सब्सटेंशियल कॉपिंग में आता है. वर्ड टू वर्ड आपने कॉपी नहीं किया बट यू कॉपीड द होल सेटअप ना, एक्सपेरिमेंटल सेटअप कॉपी कर लिया. तो दैट इज yes that is unethical and basically if ask yourself अगर आप उससे बेनिफिट हो रहे हैं, जो भी उसने जो भी सेटअप लगा के वो एक्सपेरिमेंट किया है, अगर वो लगाने से आपका एक्सपेरिमेंट आसान हो गया है then definitely he or she needs to be cited in your study, राइट, क्योंकि वो अक्सर हम बताते नहीं है, हम बस पेपर पढ़ते हैं, इसने इतने पल्स रेट पे ये किया था, उसने फ्लो रेट पे कॉलम चलाया था, ये वाली जो डेटा होता है ना, ये कोई देख नहीं रहा होता है, हम कॉपी कर लेते हैं पेपर से और उसी को सेट कर देते हैं अपने लैब एक्सपेरिमेंट में। तो अगर हम ऐसा यूज कर रहे हैं दूसरे के ऑलरेडी स्टैंडर्डाइज्ड पैरामीटर, जिसे हम कहते हैं ना, पैरामीटर किसी एक्सपेरिमेंट को करने के जो किसी और ने स्टैंडर्डाइज किए होते हैं, अगर हम उसे यूज कर रहे हैं और हमारा एक्सपेरिमेंट इज सक्सेसफुल फॉर यूजिंग दैट, तो हमें साइटेशन देना। पैराफ्रेजिंग, दिस इज द वेरी कॉमन थिंग। पैराफ्रेजिंग क्या होता है? सबसे इजी, कि आपने कुछ भी लिया, उसे अपने वर्ड्स में थोड़ा सा चेंज किया एंड यू प्रेजेंटेड लाइक दिस इज योर लैंग्वेज और योर वर्ड्स। सो यस, दैट इज आल्सो unethical. Make sure that first of all, make sure that you understand what you are paraphrasing, है ना, कि क्या आइडिया था, आपने क्या चेंज किया। दूसरी बात, चेंज करने के बाद ऐसा ना हो कि उसका मीनिंग बदल जाए। बहुत सारे आजकल क्या हो रहा है कि you must be aware, AI का टाइम है, there are many softwares, what we do, we just copy and we give the text to an AI, hey can you just paraphrase it। बहुत सारे available free softwares हैं, तो they give like something, और फिर उसे आप अगर चेक करेंगे कोई भी प्लैगरिज्म वाले सॉफ्टवेयर में, उसमें 0 प्लैगरिज्म आ जाएगा, आप बहुत खुश हो जाएंगे, ओ हमारा जो भी हमने लिखा था अभी डिटेक्ट ही नहीं हो सकता। बट व्हेन यू विल रीड इट, बेसिकली दैट इज लीविंग इट्स कंटेक्स्ट, राइट, कि जो सॉफ्टवेयर देता है वो बना तो देता है, उसे 0 प्लैगरिज्म कर देता है, बट जो वो ऑथर ने इनिशियली कहा था वो कुछ और होता है और सॉफ्टवेयर कुछ और दे रहा होता है। तो वी हैव टू बी वेरी केयरफुल इफ we are using those kind of apps or aids. Okay, so we have to understand what was written and what we are finally writing if we are paraphrasing. So be very mindful कि जो intent था, जो meaning था, that should not change. Editor's role, I think तो एडिटर्स रोल भी होता है एडिटर्स का। दे हैव, यू नो, अक्सर आपने सुना होगा व्हेन यू सबमिट अ पेपर, तो जितने भी जर्नल्स हैं उसमें दे हैव देयर ओन सॉफ्टवेयर। सबसे पहले क्या होगा, वो प्लैगरिज्म चेक हो जाता है उनके यहाँ जाते ही, तो दे हैव अ रिपोर्ट। अगर वो पास होता है तो वो आगे बढ़ाते हैं रिव्यू के लिए। इफ इट हैज सम, you know, it is crossing the limit of plagiarism, then they will revert your paper back. So they have their own, you know, set up their system for checking the plagiarism, and they have some screening services. So it's better before editors gonna check your paper, you do it yourself, right, before submitting. So have a check on yourself कि आपने जो भी लिखा है वो plagiarize नहीं है। तो ये तो plagiarism की बात हो गई कि हमने दूसरे की कॉपी कर ली, हमने उसकी इमेज ले ली, उसकी। कई बार क्या होता है, आपने वर्ड सुना होगा सेल्फ प्लैगरिज्म, सुना है? Okay, yeah, so yeah, copy is one's work. So कैसे से समझे कि आपने क्या किया, असाइनमेंट बनाया, लाइक हम जब भी पढ़ रहे थे कोर्स में, तो हमने असाइनमेंट बनाया, मॉलिक्यूलर बायोलॉजी का एक सब्जेक्ट था, मे बी एक बायो इंस्ट्रूमेंटेशन का था, उसमें भी इलेक्ट्रोफोरेसिस पे असाइनमेंट दे दिया था, इसमें भी दे दिया। तो हमने एक असाइनमेंट बनाया और एक असाइनमेंट दोनों में जमा कर दिया। सो इज इट राइट और रॉन्ग? Wrong. So that's what we are doing, कि हम एक बार करी हुई चीज को उसे कई बार यूज करें, या कई बार उस क्लास में भी यूज किया, मे बी नेक्स्ट सेमेस्टर में यूज कर लिया, तो वैसे भी तो we shouldn't be doing it. So that is comes under self plagiarism, कि हम अपनी ही चीज को बार बार प्रेजेंट कर रहे हैं एज नए काम की तरह से, एज अ नया contribution की तरह से. So you cannot present same old work of yours again and again and again. Right, so this is about, so research is basically about creating new things, right, in new ways. So if we add even our old work, so we are basically compromising the sciences. So always add new things in new ways. It shouldn't work like repacking should not work in science, कि आपने क्या किया, वही चीज थी, थोड़ा बहुत चेंज किया, उसे बीच के कंटेंट हुआ तो रीपैक करके हम सब मार्केट में उसे जब सबमिट करने चले गए। तो रीपैकिंग शुड नॉट बी द आइडिया। न्यू इनसाइट्स आर रिक्वायर्ड। अगर हम उस चीज को रिवाइज, उस टॉपिक को फर्दर कंटिन्यू भी कर रहे हैं, तो न्यू इनसाइट्स होने चाहिए उसमें, कि ठीक है आपका पुराना काम था, अब आपने इस टेक्निक से और देखा तो कुछ नए तरीके से पता चला। So new insights are acceptable or required if you are basically trying to refloat that same work again. So self Plagiarism is not copying others, as we already know, it's basically copying ourselves. So if we are doing it somewhere, somehow, maybe in materials and method or anything, so better disclose it. कि साहब ये हमने काम इस प्रोटोकॉल से किया था, and that is been published previously in my manuscript. So that is safe and smooth. So just tell them before they ask. So yeah, so what is wrong with plagiarism? So plagiarism is basically compromising originality.
These are some. Digital class report वो करेंगे। जी सर क्लास चलिए मैं करता हूँ फिर जी
Okay. All right, guys. So because of some urgent meeting, I have to leave today. Maybe we will continue next other time. So
So
sorry.
can you provide the notes of last class?
Yeah, basically, I was thinking to provide like a complete set of presentation when my lectures will be finished. So yeah.
अच्छा पीपीटी शेयर करिए।
पीपीटी ही देंगे आपको, पीपीटी ही लास्ट में पूरी उसकी दे देंगे। तो बट हम चाह रहे हैं कि एक बार कंप्लीट हो जाए सारी चीजें, बिकॉज सो लेट मी रन। अटेंडेंस शीट आपके पास है?